Whether you like it or not, Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker have left their mark on Doctor Who, and their legacy will be known within Doctor Who for however long Doctor Who itself exists, just like Stephen Moffat, Russel T Davies, and all of the classic series. That's why I think this video is interesting, because from the extremes of being a huge, massive fan of this era to absolutely hating it, I think we need to look at the legacy of what this leaves behind and what it means for the show moving forward. Now, I know this video is going to get some comments from the people who really hate Chris, who really hate Jodie, who really love Chris, and who really love Jodie. Both of those groups have their positive sides, and both of them have their negative sides. But I do think it's important to explain where I come from, and therefore you understand a little bit of my take. I am someone who has found some episodes of this era to be some of my favourites throughout the entire show. Sometimes the writing has just been top notch and it's really worked well. But I would have to say I probably lean slightly more on the negative side, where a lot of things just haven't worked with me, and I have to admit I probably am excited for a refresh. I mean, I say probably, but I think that is just me trying to, come across quite neutral. I am excited for a refresh, especially with RTD coming in. But what is the impact that Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall have left on the show? I mean, first of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Jodie Whittaker's casting as the first female Doctor is groundbreaking. Is she going to go down as one of my favourite Doctors of all time? No, probably not. But I still think, especially as she grew into the performance more, I really think she created a true Doctor for herself, a true character, and I think it was a fantastic performance. And I don't want you to think that that's just me, criticising her at the start of her run. For example, my favourite Doctor is David Tennant, but I think even with his performance, you can clearly see the differences between, say, Series 2 and Series 4. I genuinely think that in Series 2, David is great, but it seems a little bit uncomfortable, whereas by the time you get to Series 4 and the specials, he is in his element and delivering what is, for me, a perfect performance. So yes, for the legacy of the show, Jodie giving us a Doctor to remember is going to leave a legacy on the show. And you also can't ignore the fact that as the first female Doctor, that is just groundbreaking within itself. Proving that this character can be a role model for all is a fantastic first step. This era also introduces our first black and black female Doctor in the Ruth Doctor, or the Fugitive Doctor. Has many names. And yes, I'd have loved to have seen more done with this character, but again, fantastic strides for representation in this British landmark. I think that's the important thing. When people look at this representation, you have to understand that this is one of, if not the biggest Doctor Who franchise in terms of, longevity, iconicness, like Doctor Who, maybe James Bond, in terms of British flagship pieces of media, those are the ones. And yeah, that is going to leave a legacy. Moving on slightly, it has been acknowledged that other writers like RTD and Stephen Moffat have included issue-based storytelling within their stories, but Chris Chibnall really decided to focus in on that. And I think for the legacy of the show and how the show moves forward, I think he proves some valuable points. You've got episodes such as Rosa, which deal with its issues so beautifully, so delicately, telling a very interesting story and breaking your heart in a way. And then you've also got stories like Orphan 55 that decide to tell its global warming message too strongly that it takes over the story and you lose any reason for watching it. Again, I look at Doctor Who as this big, important flagship show for the UK generally. So that's why it's important for it to sometimes deal with issues that we face in the real world. I think this proves when it's done right, it really does have a place in Doctor Who. But it also shows when you take it too far and it takes over, that's when it doesn't start to work. And I think future showrunners can take notes from that. In other good bits of legacy, Phasmin. At the end of the day, I have said previously that I am not a fan of the Doctor getting into romantic relationships with companions. For example, yes, I do find Ten and Rose a bit weird. But at the end of the day, the way I've come to look at Phasmin is that that storyline, for those that it represents, means so much that my opinions on it are kind of null and void. I've seen the way that fans have latched onto that storyline and felt so represented by it that my feelings to not liking the Doctor really getting into a romantic relationship with companions doesn't really matter anymore because of what it has done for some. Look, some are going to disagree with me on this, but whether you like something or not, sometimes your opinion is a little bit less valid because the people that it's representing feel so represented that's what I'm saying, is that storyline does so much for them that your opinion on, and my opinion, for example, of not wanting the Doctor to get into romantic relationships doesn't matter anymore because that storyline has done so much for others. What about some more jovial bits of legacy? I am going to bring up Flux here, because I think Doctor Who Flux proves why the episodic storytelling is probably the way to go for Doctor Who. Because if you asked 100 Doctor Who fans to rank the Doctor Who series, I would bet you that the one ranked in last the most is Doctor Who Flux. I think the reason for this is inconsistency within specific stories. Let me explain using series 11 and 12. There are episodes within it all that I like and don't like. But overall, there is a lot of good there, and I can have positive opinions on those seasons. But with Flux, because that is one story, I either like that story or don't like that story. Now, I'm not saying Doctor Who should never do a serialised story again, because I do think if it was written a little bit better, I do think a serialised story could work. But I do think it's worth noting that what I would say is the least successful series to date is the only one that happens to be a serialised structure. Finally, I want to talk about hiring a showrunner. Because for me, overall, Chris Chibnall has been my least favourite. And I do think it's important to look at the differences between Moffat and Chibnall, because both of them wrote under previous showrunners. And the reason why I believe Moffat overall worked is because you can see, littered throughout the RTD era, there is great story after great story after great story, and he proved himself not only as a writer, but as a Doctor Who writer. Yes, Chris Chibnall did Broadchurch, and Broadchurch is genuinely fantastic. But if you look at the, I believe, 4 stories and one of which is a two-parter, his writing is a lot less consistent overall. Because he wrote things like 42, the Silurian two-parter in Season 5, Power of 3, and Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. Oh, I got all those out in one take. While none of it's bad, if those are your only episodes to take forward, I'm not sure we knew his style from the start. For example, we knew from Moffat's work that he was willing to go scary, he was willing to, do cool things and mess about with time quite a lot, and that's what he did in his series that he wrote. With Chibnall, there was lots of little bits of comedy, but apart from that, there wasn't really much genuine style coming off in his episodes, and I think that shows within his Doctor Who. And the legacy of this is that you can be a good writer, you can be a Doctor Who fan, that doesn't necessarily make you a good Doctor Who writer. Especially as a showrunner, it's not just about making fun episodes, it's about taking the show in new and different ways. Look at what Moffat did in Season 5, making things more like a fairy tale, and then in Season 6 really going into sci-fi and time travel and all of the weirdness of it. Might not have pulled it off, but there was some style and some real substance there that I can really appreciate. I think that's what we have to learn going forward. Doctor Who has to make stylistic choices to survive, and I don't believe Chris Chibnall did that. But that's just my opinion, and what I'd like to do, if anyone is willing to, please let me know what you think the legacy of Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker is down below, because I would love to read them, because I think where I want to leave this video is I have been overall quite negative on videos on this channel, especially as a lot of my Doctor Who content has come later in the era where things just really haven't been working for me. I want people to know that if you have enjoyed Jodie Whittaker or Chris Chibnall Who, that is fantastic. Because at the end of the day, if you can enjoy something, that has to be seen as a good thing. I did not. Sometimes that is sad, but I obviously wish people that have enjoyed it happiness, because I want people to enjoy things and like the media they watch in general. So if you've had a great experience with them, pop it down below. If you've had a bad experience, I've got to be wary, because sometimes this does involve slight sexism. But please pop it down. I'd love to have some discussions. And if you like this style of video, I made a video talking about this statement of, if you don't like current Doctor Who, as in like Jodie Whittaker's Doctor Who, you shouldn't be watching it. And I analysed whether that statement is true, because it was a topic that interested me. So go watch it. Thanks guys, and I will see you another time. Please subscribe as well. Legends. Cheers.